Deep within the desolate, wind-swept borderlands of Northumberland, England, there stands a fortress that does not merely house history, but seems to trap the very essence of agony within its stone flesh. This is not a story of folklore or campfire superstition. This is a recounting of documented events, architectural anomalies, and centuries of recorded testimony that point to a singular, terrifying conclusion. Some places are built for living, but this place was built for dying. Welcome to Nocturnal Ledger. To understand the horrors of Chillingham Castle, one must first understand the soil upon which it sits. This is the northernmost edge of England, a region once known as the Debatable Lands. For centuries, this was a lawless frontier, a blood-soaked chessboard between the English and the Scots. It was here, in the 12th century, that the foundations of Chillingham were laid, not as a home, but as a stronghold against a world that knew only violence. The castle was a strategic linchpin for King Edward I, known to history as the Hammer of the Scots. When you walk the corridors of Chillingham today, you are walking the same path as William Wallace, King Henry III, and royalty that commanded armies. But the true residents of Chillingham are not the kings who visited, but the souls who never left. The historical record shows that Chillingham Castle has been owned by one continuous bloodline, the Grey family and their descendants, the Earls of Tankerville, since the 1200s. This continuity is vital. It means the records are intact. The letters, the diaries, and the death certificates have not been lost to time. They remain, bearing witness to a legacy of execution, betrayal, and torture that rivals any fiction. The atmosphere of Chillingham is palpable before you even cross the threshold. Visitors and paranormal investigators alike report a sudden, oppressive shift in the air pressure as they approach the heavy oak doors. The castle is surrounded by ancient woodlands and is the home of the Chillingham wild cattle, a prehistoric herd of white beasts that have remained genetically isolated for hundreds of years. They are wild, untamable creatures that roam the grounds like ghosts of a primeval past, setting a tone of isolation that cuts the castle off from the modern world. But the true terror lies inside. We must begin our descent into the darkness with the most infamous figure associated with the castle, a man whose name appears in the darkest chapters of the castle's oral and written history, John Sage. During the reign of Edward I, the border wars were at their peak. The English needed a man who lacked empathy, a man who viewed the human body not as a vessel of life, but as a mechanism to be broken. John Sage was the castle's resident torturer. Historical accounts suggest that Sage was a lieutenant in the army who rose to his grisly position through sheer brutality. It is estimated that over 3 years, he was responsible for the torture and execution of nearly 7,500 Scots. These were not quick deaths. The dungeon and the torture chamber at Chillingham remain today, preserved in a state of arrested decay, standing as a testament to Sage's handiwork. Let us walk into the torture chamber as it exists now. The room is dark, damp, and smells of old iron and earth. But the most chilling detail is the floor. It is not level. The stone floor slopes significantly toward the center and down to one side. This was not an architectural mistake. This was a design feature. It was created so that the blood, gallons of it over the years, would drain away from the torturer's boots, keeping his workspace clean while his victims were dismantled. In this room, you will find the barrel. A simple wooden barrel, seemingly innocuous, until you look inside and see the iron spikes driven through the staves. Prisoners were forced inside. The lid was sealed, and the barrel was rolled down the steep hill outside the castle. If the fall didn't kill them, the spikes would. There is the stretching rack, the thumbscrews, and the Iron Maiden. These are not props. These are the actual instruments used on human beings whose screams were swallowed by the thick stone walls. The end of John Sage is as horrific as his life. When the border wars briefly subsided and a truce was called, the English needed to dispose of the evidence of their cruelty. Sage became a liability. The records indicate that he was dragged into the castle courtyard. In a twist of poetic justice, or perhaps vengeance, the adults of the region watched as he was hanged. But he was not dead yet. As he swung, struggling for air, the townspeople, many of whom had lost family to his blade, cut him down while he was still alive. They then proceeded to cut off his nose, his ears, and other parts of his body, before burning him on a pyre. It is said that the entity of John Sage still stalks the dungeons. Visitors report a heavy, dragging sound, like a boot with a broken heel, echoing in the lower chambers. Many have reported the sensation of being choked, or a sudden, burning pain on their skin, as if touched by invisible fire. The hate required to torture thousands does not simply dissipate when the heart stops beating. It stains the walls. It creates a residue that time cannot scrub away. However, not all the ghosts of Chillingham are born of malice. Some are born of sorrow so profound it anchors the spirit to the physical world. One of the most documented and celebrated supernatural phenomena in British history is the Radiant Boy, often called the Blue Boy. For centuries, guests staying in what is known as the Pink Room reported a terrifying ordeal. The reports were remarkably consistent, spanning different eras and coming from people who had no contact with one another. They would wake in the dead of night to the sound of a child crying, a sobbing, desperate sound that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Then, a flash of blue light would appear, hovering above the bed or near the fireplace. Inside this halo of blue luminescence, the figure of a young boy dressed in blue clothing would materialize. This was not a fleeting shadow. Witnesses described seeing his face, contorted in terror and pain. The experience was so intense that many guests refused to ever sleep in the castle again. The haunting became a local legend, dismissed by skeptics as a trick of the moonlight or the overactive imagination of aristocratic guests. That is, until the 1920s. During a renovation project, workmen were tasked with opening up a section of the thick stone wall in the Pink Room. As they chiseled away the masonry, the room filled with a cloud of ancient dust. Behind the stone, in a cavity that had been sealed for centuries, they found something that silenced the skeptics instantly. They found the skeleton of a young boy. And surrounded by the fragile bones were fragments of decayed blue cloth. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. The physical evidence matched the spectral testimony perfectly. Upon examination, the bones revealed a gruesome detail. The fingers of the skeleton were badly damaged, scratched and worn down at the tips. Forensic analysis suggested that the boy had been walled up alive. The damage to his fingers came from his desperate, futile attempts to scratch his way out of his stone tomb as the oxygen ran out. Following the discovery, the bones were given a Christian burial in the local churchyard. Since that day, the sightings of the Blue Boy have ceased, though the flashes of blue light are still occasionally reported, a residual echo of the energy that was trapped there for so long. This intersection of folklore and forensic archaeology provides one of the most compelling cases for the existence of the supernatural. It validates the idea that a haunting is often a plea for the truth to be uncovered. But the Pink Room is just one cell in this hive of activity. We must turn our attention to the Grey Lady, Lady Mary Berkeley. Her story is one of betrayal, a different kind of torture than that of John Sage, but no less painful. Lady Mary was the wife of Lord Grey of Wark and Chillingham in the 17th century. The historical letters paint a picture of a woman deeply in love and a husband who was callously indifferent. Lord Grey eventually abandoned her. Left alone in the vast, freezing castle, Lady Mary fell into a deep depression. She spent her days and nights pacing the corridors, waiting for a husband who would never return, staring out of the high windows at the unforgiving landscape. She died in the castle, heartbroken and alone. Witnesses today, including the current staff and the Wakefield family who reside in the castle, report the distinct sound of a silk dress rustling in the empty corridors. It is a soft, swishing sound, accompanied by a sudden drop in temperature. Unlike the malevolent presence in the dungeon, Lady Mary's presence is described as heavy with sadness. Guests have reported the scent of flowers and old lace manifesting suddenly in stagnant rooms. Some claim to see a pale figure standing at the window, looking out toward the driveway, eternally waiting. The sheer volume of eyewitness accounts at Chillingham is staggering. We are not talking about a handful of reports over a century. We are talking about thousands of entries in the castle's logbooks. These come from hardened skeptics, police officers, military personnel, and unwitting tourists who knew nothing of the castle's reputation. One particular area of intense activity is the Oubliette. The word comes from the French oublier, meaning to forget. It is a dungeon with no door, only a hatch in the ceiling. Prisoners were thrown down into the darkness and simply left to die of starvation or broken bones. The floor of the Chillingham Oubliette was filled with the remains of those who perished there. When the castle was being restored, the workers found that the floor they were standing on was actually a compacted layer of skeletons, feet deep. The psychological horror of the Oubliette is difficult to articulate. Imagine the darkness, the silence, the smell of the decaying bodies of those who fell before you. It is no wonder that visitors standing near the grate today report overwhelming feelings of nausea and dizziness. This is consistent with what paranormal researchers call stone tape theory. The hypothesis suggests that high emotional events, such as murder or torture, can be recorded into the environment, specifically into the silica of the stone and the iron of the earth. Under the right conditions, this recording plays back. At Chillingham, the recording is a symphony of suffering. We must also examine the documented experiences of the current owners. Sir Humphrey Wakefield, whose wife is a descendant of the Greys, has spent decades restoring the castle. He is a pragmatic man. Yet he speaks openly about the reality of the phenomena. He has described hearing voices when no one is there, objects moving of their own accord, and the distinct feeling of being watched. In one chilling account, a security guard patrolling the grounds at night reported seeing a shadow detach itself from the wall of the inner courtyard. The shadow moved with purpose, gliding across the cobblestones before vanishing into the solid oak door of the great hall. The guard's dog, a trained Alsatian, refused to enter the area, whining and cowering with its hackles raised. Animals are often the first to sense what we cannot, and the reaction of the dogs at Chillingham is a recurring theme in the testimonies. There is also the matter of the chapel. Beside the altar, there is a small room that was once a hidden pantry. 2 skeletons were discovered beneath the floorboards here during renovations. Visitors to the chapel frequently report hearing 2 voices whispering. It is never distinct enough to make out the words, but the tone is always frantic, conspiratorial. Recording devices left in the empty chapel have captured EVPs, or electronic voice phenomena, of whispers, knocks, and groans that are inaudible to the human ear but clear on playback. The scientific community has attempted to debunk the happenings at Chillingham. They cite infrasound caused by the wind rushing through the drafty corridors, which can cause hallucinations and feelings of dread. They speak of electromagnetic fields generated by old wiring, but these explanations fail to account for the specificity of the sightings. Infrasound does not create a blue boy in a pink room whose physical bones are later found in the exact spot of the apparition. Electromagnetic fields do not create the shared hallucination of a woman in a silk dress seen by multiple people simultaneously who have no prior knowledge of the history. The Edwardian pantry of the castle holds another terror. This was the domain of the servants, yet it is plagued by a shadowy figure known as the White Pantry Ghost. One witness, a footman in the early 20th century, was guarding the silver when he saw a woman in white materialize and ask for water. Thinking she was a guest, he turned to pour a glass. When he turned back, she was gone. The doors were locked. There was nowhere she could have gone. This figure is believed to be a servant who was poisoned, her spirit trapped in the loop of her final thirst. What makes Chillingham distinct from other haunted locations is the physical interaction. This is not a passive haunting. People are pushed, they are scratched. There are reports of visitors having their hair pulled or feeling an invisible hand grab their ankle on the stairs. In the minstrel's hall, a grand room with a high gallery, guests have reported the sensation of being shoved from behind, only to turn and find empty air. This aggressive behavior aligns with the violent history of the location. The energy here is not dormant. It is active, and it is hostile. We must also consider the layout of the castle itself. It is a maze of spiral staircases, hidden passages, and priest holes. During the Reformation, Catholic priests were hunted men. They hid in tiny voids between walls, sometimes for days, sometimes until they died. The claustrophobia of the architecture contributes to the dread. You are never quite sure what lies behind the paneling. In the King Edward Room, named for the monarch who stayed there, the atmosphere is regal but imposing. But it is the courtyard that often unnerves people the most. It was here that the executions took place. It was here that the heads of traitors were displayed on spikes. During the day, it is a beautiful example of medieval architecture. At night, it transforms. The shadows stretch unnaturally. The wind whistling through the archways sounds remarkably like the keening of widows. Let's delve deeper into a specific, modern investigation that took place in the early 2000s. A team of researchers locked themselves in the torture chamber overnight. They brought with them thermal imaging cameras and highly sensitive audio equipment. Around 3 in the morning, the thermal camera picked up a heat signature in the center of the room, near the rack. It was a cold spot, significantly lower in temperature than the surrounding air. But it moved with the fluidity of a human. Simultaneously, the audio recorder captured a sound. It wasn't a scream. It was a laugh. A low, guttural, mocking laugh. When the team played the audio back, they realized the laugh coincided perfectly with the movement of the cold spot. The idea that something in that room finds the memory of torture amusing is perhaps the most disturbing thought of all. The legacy of the Chillingham wild cattle also deserves a deeper mention in this tapestry of the uncanny. These animals are the only survivors of the wild herds that once roamed the forests of Britain. They are untouched by modern breeding. Legend says that if a member of the Castle family is about to die, the king bull of the herd can be heard bellowing in the night, a sound that carries for miles. It is a harbinger of death, linking the natural world outside the walls to the supernatural world within. As we analyze the accumulation of evidence, a pattern emerges. The hauntings at Chillingham are not random. They are tied to specific traumas. The Blue Boy and the Wall, the torturer and the dungeon, the lady and the abandonment. It suggests that the castle acts as a battery, storing the kinetic energy of extreme human emotion. The psychological impact on those who live and work there is profound. Staff members have resigned after a single shift. Restoration workers have refused to work in certain rooms alone. There is a documented report of a painter who was working on the ceiling of the Great Hall. He claimed that he felt the ladder shaking violently, as if someone were trying to throw him off. He looked down and saw a man in medieval dress standing at the base of the ladder, looking up with a sneer. The painter scrambled down and fled the castle, leaving his tools behind. He never returned to collect them. Even the skeptics who visit Chillingham often leave with more questions than answers. There is a weight to the air, a sense of being an intruder in a house that belongs to the dead. The silence of the castle is not empty, it is expectant. It feels as though the walls are holding their breath, waiting for the next tragedy to record. The story of Chillingham is not over. The castle still stands. The family still lives there. And the ghosts still walk. It is a place where the veil between the past and the present is worn thin, shredded by the violence of history. As you lay in the safety of your own home tonight, listening to the settling of the house and the wind outside, ask yourself this: if walls could talk, what would yours say? But more importantly, be thankful they don't speak with the voices of Chillingham, because in the nocturnal ledger of this castle, every debt is paid in blood, and the account is never closed. This has been a documented exploration of the supernatural reality of Chillingham Castle. The records exist. The bones were real. The fear is genuine. Sleep well, if you can. This is Nocturnal Ledger.